What's up, Facebook world? It's Ryan Bant again, coming to you live from the St. Louis metro area, 3:45 Central Standard Time. Today we're going to talk about injuries or the opportunity to prevent those injuries. A lot of things that need to be done and things that I've learned from my own experience that cause a lot of issues in terms of me kind of learning the hard way and spending a lot of time injured and being beat up and not necessarily having the positive experiences I would have liked to have had as an athlete, and in many ways feeling like my career was shortchanged a little bit due to a lot of those injuries. And the good news is over time, sometimes the most difficult experiences that we have are our best teachers. And so for me, you guys probably need to know a little bit about my story, which is I was an early mature, so I was this height in sixth grade. I was shaving in sixth grade, and so I was really, really fast and physically, in many ways, like superior to people who were prepubescent. I went through puberty when I was in fourth grade, and so in many respects, I was that kid that everybody was checking, wanting to know the birth certificate and wanting to know if there was something there in terms of me being not of the correct age and competing against little kids and stuff. But the reality is that I was just an early mature, so I didn't necessarily take good care of my body. Your parents are always the ones saying, hey, you need to warm up, you need to cool down, you need to lift weights, you need to do all these types of things. And I was like, I'm not going to do any of that. I don't want to do that. I just want to go out and compete. I want to run hard, I want to race, I want to chase, and that's all I care about. And so when you're younger, you can get away with that. You can do a lot of things, and in many ways, you feel invulnerable. And I felt invulnerable. And so because of that preconceived vulnerability that I had of myself, I didn't do the things to help protect myself or to keep myself healthy, which was unfortunate. And because of that, I suffered serious injuries that then threatened the rest of my athletic career and kept me from achieving the things that I really wanted to achieve. Most specifically, I suffered a hamstring tear when I was a sophomore in high school. And that hamstring tear was very, very significant. And to learn from that experience, so why did it happen? Well, we had multiple days in a row of a high school practice where we were running to fatigue. Large volumes of intervals that were very, very long, followed by technical work, and specifically, we were working on relays. And I had already cooled down, something I told you I didn't do very much of, but on that day, I actually cooled down and I was done. I stretched out, and I felt like I was finished, and my legs were shot. Now, why were my legs shot? Well, the day before, we did a bunch of long sprints, 400s and 200s, and then the following day, our technical day, after a day of fatigue, we went out and I was working on the triple jump. Because as a freshman, I was a solid long jumper, and I had an explosive first phase of the triple jump, and so we were working on that. Then I cooled down, and then I followed up doing some handoffs for the 4x1. And of course, I was extremely tired. And so I got out, left and responded right at the tennis ball like you're supposed to. And before I actually got the baton, I felt my hamstring explode. And to make matters worse, my friend Dominique Jones said, Coach, I actually heard it pop. I heard it pop. So I knew that there was something wrong. And so we're going to talk about a little bit later in this conversation about not just the physical injuries, but also the mental trauma that comes from being injured for a really long time and not being connected with the team, which is something important that we need to understand. So how can we learn from my experience? Well, number one, after I had that hamstring injury, the athlete does face that reality that they are not invulnerable. It's probably one of the first serious injuries that a kid or an athlete will be a muscle tear of something. And if it's a hamstring, it's going to be a nuisance for a really, really long time unless you provide a structure to get on top of it. Now, what's really cool in our program, and I'm very proud of this, in the last 10 years, I've only had one hamstring tear. And at the very beginning of that 10 years, we had another hamstring tear, and these two athletes had something in common. They were both short women with very, very powerful quads and hamstrings with a Q angle that was pretty severe and small feet. So amorphically, you're not going to be able to do anything to help someone in that situation. You can't change how they're structured. But what you can do is change their attitude towards warming up, cooling down, and things that you can do to diagnose injuries ahead of time. So one of the biggest things that we did in our program is we kind of adopted the philosophy that we're not just going to move forward. So one of the things that I wish I would have known a long time ago is that when you're a track and field athlete, you're running straight all the time. So how have we dealt with not overloading those muscles in one direction? Well, we always support our athletes with running drills backwards, laterally, and then we do jumping, and then of course we also run forward. Another thing we do is on days of tempo training, which is that 70% to 80% with short recoveries in between, working on your abilities of your body to tolerate the development of waste, hydrogen ions, or what people used to call back in the day lactic acid. So on those days when we're not going as fast, what we try to do is we try to run both the clockwise around the track and counterclockwise like you normally do in a track practice. And what that does is as athletes are running to their side all the time and leaning over to the side, they're getting those muscles developed in a certain way, but they're not providing those muscles balance. When they are constantly running in this way, you're always overloading one side. So one of the things we've tried to do is run both directions around the track to not overload that and to get the athlete's body to be in balance. Now, you're always going to have asymmetry in track and field. That's just normal. But we want to eliminate as much of those crazy problems as you're going to have. Another thing we found out is like anything you can do to keep an athlete moving in your program, and anything you can get them to be as close as you possibly can to the A workout. So if you've got option A, we're going to run this, we're going to do this many reps, we're going to do it at this pace. Okay, but if the athlete is injured or has a muscle tear or a pull or a strain or a cramp, you've got to figure out, well, what are they able to do? Well, number one of the things we do is we use our drills as a diagnostic tool to screen our athletes ahead of time. So if we see something that looks odd, that they're favoring a leg or they seem fatigued, we pull them out, we talk to them about it, and we deal with it. We also have a Google Doc that the kids can fill out before a practice saying, hey, I'm requesting a lesser practice. I'm feeling something wrong in my legs. A part of my body feels really sore. There are things that aren't right. Can I cross-train today, or can I have an optional workout, or can I do a B workout, a C workout, a D workout? And that's really helped us reduce those injuries quite a bit, because we're able to screen those things and get that information ahead of time in practice. Because one of the things that's really frustrating and difficult to deal with is when you have the list of the baton death march of all these people telling you bad things before practice, that they think they got something wrong with them or whatever. And at that point, 10 minutes before practice, you don't have any options. It doesn't give you any flexibility. So it's good to be able to have that Google Doc for those kids to fill out to say, hey, I think there's something wrong. And then that gives you an opportunity to know, hey, I got to go talk to that kid, and I've got to come up with something else for that kid to do. So the question goes, can you run all out? Okay, you can't run all out. Can you run at 80%, 60%, 50%? If you can't do those things, can you dribble run? Can you accelerate? Now, usually if they have a hamstring injury, you want to be careful with that, but they might be able to pull a sled, they might be able to accelerate, they might be able to do that. Can you jog walk? Can you do those things? Because the more you keep the repertoire going, the more you keep as close as you can to the real practice going, the shorter the recovery time will be. Now, if they go all the way down to, I can't dribble run, I can't pull a sled, I can't jog walk, I can't do any of those things, well, now they're going to have to cross-train. Okay, well, what does that cross-training look like? If they have a severely injured leg or severely injured upper body or something like that, you don't completely stop doing work. There's a thing called the crossover effect, which if one side of the body is working, the other side still gets some benefits to the one side working. And it actually reduces the time back to full competition by still working the one side. So there have been times where we've had an athlete who's had an ankle injury or a stress reaction in a leg or something like that, where maybe they can't do the treadmill, obviously. They can't do the elliptical, but we can put them on a bike and we can have their leg up and the other leg is working while the other leg is not being moved, and it returns them a lot quicker to practice. The other thing is we always try to see what we can get through. If a kid comes to us and tells us something is wrong, we always ask them to try to warm up first, unless obviously they're on crutches or in a wheelchair or something crazy like that. We always want to warm them up, because there are times where I didn't know this. I would just cut a kid from practice, say, okay, well, I guess you're going to go see the trainer, where a lot of times something is sore or tight. It could be a nerve being pinched. It could just be the muscles aren't warmed up, and eventually the athlete is fine once you've gone through a really, really thorough warm-up. The other thing that we do to prevent hamstring injuries is we do a lot of leg swings every other day that involve the glutes and the hips and the lumbar area and the lower abdomen, because all of that stuff is connected right there at the center of mass, which is where you're going to get hamstring injuries. And so what we found, which is really interesting, as you're doing these big leg swings, and if you go on my YouTube page and look at all the drills, they're all over there. But what's interesting is you look at those drills and you go, oh, well, those drills seem to be hip dominant. But the reality is the kids oftentimes will complain, oh my God, my glutes are on fire, my lower back is on fire, oh my God. Now, if you're paying attention, the athlete is telling you, this is a weakness for me. Now, they're not saying that outright, but the message they're sending you is that. And so then what you can be is prescriptive to say, okay, these are things that maybe their glutes are not firing properly, or they don't have the mobility there, or they don't have the strength there, or the specific endurance that they need. And then that might be something you want to pay attention to when they're running, to take a look at their posture. Or more importantly, you can prescribe drills, core routines, static strength routines, or isometrics, and things like that. So those were things that we did to reduce injuries for hamstrings, and it's been very, very helpful. I've only had, one in the last 10 years. The other thing is we lift 3 times a week in the regular season if it's possible, and we lift 4 times a week in the winter, because the winter you might not be able to get outside all the time. So one of the things we use the winter for is we want to be as strong as we possibly can, and we know we can be in the weight room, and we know we can be in the weight room for 2 hours a day, and we lift 4 days a week. Now that doesn't mean we lift the same thing every day, because that would be dumb, but we lift the upper body one day, and then we rotate the lower body, and then lift the upper body, and then rotate the lower body. Now, another thing that we do, and that's all hamstring stuff, but is that we used to do our drills on the track all the time. Well, to reduce some joint injuries, so we're going to start talking about number 2. To reduce joint injuries, we decided to move our drills to the turf as often as we can. Now, I know Coach Path, who you guys know I love and respect, and he's one of my favorite people in the world. He doesn't like that, but for a developmental athlete who doesn't have necessarily the bone density that you want or the connective tissue strength that you want, this is something that you could be pretty smart about. And so what we did is we put all the athletes on the turf and we lined them up, but we were able to basically get everybody in a single line or a single column running all at the same time down the turf, which is great for reducing shin issues, knee issues, stress fractures or stress reactions. And we were having a big problem with our stress reactions and our stress fractures. Going to that almost made those completely gone in track and field. Now in cross country, just because of the volume of work you have to do, those injuries still are around, but in track they disappeared. But then what happened is we started to get hamstring, not pulls, because I haven't had only one in 10 years, but we had hamstring cramps all the time, especially early on in the season, because most of the drills that you're doing are that paw back action into the ground, cycling over the knee and pulling back. So for those athletes that aren't used to having that hamstring fire in that way, as it gets stretched like a rubber band and then responds as it pulls the body over the foot, over the center of mass, they were getting some hamstring cramps. Now the good news is because it was just these drills and the stuff that's going on, we're able to then provide the can you do this B, C, D, E type workouts. And the athletes don't end up getting hurt because we were able to figure that out and we were able to do that. So what did I do? Well, we just added in rest time, and I forced those kids to hang around for a little bit, which drives my distance coaches nuts because they want to be able to get through the drills fast. But for those kids that are out of shape or have been playing basketball or doing athletics, and this is the first time they've done anything athletic, is the opening of track season, you got to be careful because you don't need them in February You need them in May or June. So it's okay to be smart about that and to take some time and to teach them how to do the drills properly and to have your expert upperclassmen athletes demonstrate. So that's one of the things that we do when we do these drills. The kids don't have any clue in their mind's eye what that drill is supposed to look like. So oftentimes we'll have all the returning athletes do the drill in front of them, so they could see row after row after row these athletes doing the drill correctly. And then what we do is then we have them mix in on the way back. So we've done two things. One, we've demonstrated it better than what they probably would do without seeing it before. And then two, we've cut the drills in half for them so that they don't have an overload and they're going to get those cramps because the hamstrings aren't used to it. Now, the other thing that we found, at the end of a really, really difficult workout, a really difficult workout, one of the things we found is when you ask an athlete to cool down, they start getting those calf cramps like that, and they're rolling on the ground and going crazy. And even though that's a cramp, that could take them out of 2 or 3 or 4 workouts because they're still really, really sore because that calf locked up and it wouldn't release. And so then you got the kid like holding the foot and trying to release it. So what we found that actually works fix that is descending pace striders as opposed to the ugly 2.5 lap cool down where they're like shuffle walking and they're not really doing what they need to do and their mechanics are all terrible. And the reason why they get that cramp is because when you sprint, the front leg and the leg that's down and the leg that's up, they're doing their work. It's all split, and the muscles in the front of the leg and the muscles in the back of the leg are pulling equal work. When you go to the cool down jog, now it's only the calves that are getting any kind of force production. And because of that, those calves are already fatigued and tired, and now you're super overloading them. You're basically doing high-end calf lifts or raises for 800 meters. So take that out. So for the first couple of days, you can do the descending pace 100 striders. We do it on the turf. We do it with our shoes off, so the foot is more of a part of that. And what we do is we start off at 85%, 70%, 60%, 50%, and you can just stay at 50% from there. And what you get is you get 800 meters of cool down, but with much better mechanics, no calf cramps, and it's just a much more quality piece of work. And then as you move through, you can have them walk a lap, jog a lap, walk a lap, and they always have to static stretch at the end of practice. It's unacceptable that they don't. And before they check out and before they get a fist bump or a handshake from you, that's something you have to see that they do. Now, all of that stuff on the turf has helped reduce joint injuries. Number two thing, though, and man, I'm going on here forever, holy cow, but was we found out that Accutane, if you take an Accutane or an anti-zit type of medicine, it attacks the joints. It's highly destructive to the body. And these sprinters and throwers and jumpers and distance runners are pounding their joints all the time. I had a young lady who went on to Arkansas, and she had plantar fasciitis, and then went on to Arkansas and battled a whole bunch of injuries. And they figured they asked somebody smart, really smart, said, "Hey, are you taking Accutane?" And she's like, "Yeah, I am." Well, let's try to get you off of it. And I'm not kidding you. Within a month, all of her injuries cleared up, all of her soreness cleared up, and she was ready to fly. Now, other things that we've learned from joint injuries and things like that, besides, running on soft surfaces for your drills, you can also run on soft surfaces for your tempo runs, especially if they're extensive tempo where you have a little lower of an intensity percentage, maybe like 70%, but you're going kind of continuously. There's no reason not to do that on the turf. Also, you shouldn't be doing any of your tempo running in spikes. There's no need to do it. We're not looking for the quality of effort and the quality of movement at the same level. Your tempo work is there to make you a better athlete in practice, to recover better, to improve your buffering system, to work on laying down capillary beds. It isn't one of those things we're really doing for mechanics. And we want our mechanics to be good, but the cost benefit of having the spikes on versus not having the spikes on, take the spikes off, run in your regular shoes that you would normally cross-train in. That also reduces joint injuries. Now with the distance kiddos, one of the things we found out is a lot of our good distance kiddos are also on our swim team. And our swim team is really good for the girls. We were second in the state last year, and Coach Meyer and Coach Spector in the past have done a really, really good job with their swim program. The problem is that those kids are extremely they are in really good aerobic shape. And you're like, well, what's the problem with that? Well, there's no problem with the cardiovascular system being so great and pumped, and the heart's ready and the lungs are ready. But the problem is that system is way out of bounds in terms of what their body is able to do. What we found through research is that when you spend all this time in the pool, your firing mechanics change, your firing patterns change, your connective tissue isn't as put together as it should be, your bone density actually is down. They found like bone density in swimmers is a very different thing than it is for other athletes. And so when they come out onto the track, what we found is they'll run really, really well for like the first 3 or 4 weeks, and then they just blow up. Well, the reason why they blow up is because the structure isn't there. Think about it this way. Think if you had a Ferrari Testarossa engine and you put it in an old school Pinto. And that would be really cool for those people who pull up on the line and start revving their engines. You blow them off the line once. But then you know that a wheel or a ball bearing is going to fly out of there, and the chassis isn't able to handle the horsepower over a long time that the body is expected to hold on to. So how do we deal with that in swimming? So one of the things we'll do with the kids that have a history of injuries or stress reactions or stress fractures is we'll cross train every other day for the first 3 weeks of the season. And then we try to slide in maybe 2 days in a row of being on the surface, 3 days in a row of being on the surface. So 2 to 1, 3 to 1. And we constantly cross train, and we keep cross training as part of their program. Now, does that truncate, or not truncate, but does that, shorten their abilities later on? Does it reduce their abilities later on? Maybe, but if they're hurt, they're not going to help you anyway. So you got to figure out ways to get them into the program and move them along slowly but surely without blowing them up. And then maybe after a full season of being healthy over the summer or the winter or wherever that season may be, maybe you can add in a little bit of volume and a couple more days of frequent training. So those are things that we found. The other thing with distance runners and cross-country runners and things like that, when you run on a soft surface, that's great because it reduces your shin and your stress fracture issues and things like that. But then what it increases is the chance of you hurting your knee or rolling an ankle, which happens all the time. So what we've decided to do as a program is we will rotate between trail runs and road runs pretty religiously every week. So in cross country, even though maybe, our team, we had, 5 seniors graduate the year before, so last year was a bit of a rebuilding year, but we still were pretty good. And I don't know if you watch my, on my Facebook or not, but we had 3 girls that were the top 10 or top 11. 3 of the girls were in the top 11 for most improved in the 3200, and we've had a big improvement out of our kids. Anyway, so what we've done is we rotate those surfaces not just for road long runs or aerobic runs. We also do that for our tempo runs and our speed workouts. So we'll have a workout where we're flat on the track. That's a tough workout, and then later on in the week for a distance runner, we'll have a tough workout on the soft surfaces and on the hills and stuff like that. And then we do the same thing for our distance runs. And what we found is we've reduced both injuries by not having the athletes exposed to those things frequently. And the other thing is if you've got a cross-country course or a route that you run all the time, you need to try to change that up or let your kids free run once in a while within reason, because there might be a certain part of the course where they're at a funny angle, and it might be okay to race that, and see it once in a race, but to see it every day in practice over and over again overly exposes those athletes to injuries. So you need to be smart about that and be careful. Another thing we try to do with joint and injuries, so if they do come up with a stress reaction or stress fracture or something like that, is we try to have them still out with us for whatever they can do in warm up and drills. So we'll modify drills. So if it's a drill that requires a bounce or a hop, we'll try to find a drill that's as close as it can be to a walk like that, or a step touch, or a lunge, or a backwards lunge, or a side lunge. Anything that they can still do to be a part of the team is very, very valuable, and that helps. And then instead of having them go on a bike inside where they're in a trainer's room by themselves, you have no idea what they're doing, we'll actually have them do workouts on the track, on a bike, and you have to be very careful because people are zigzagging around, and it's like Formula One, and you don't want people to get run over, but so far we've been very blessed and lucky that we haven't had that to be a problem. And then certainly when we go on road runs, they bring their bike up to school, and we'll hold the bike in our shed, or the parents might bring it up every day, whatever they want to do, but then they'll ride that bike at practice. And then what we usually do is we'll add the volume on the bike riding because they can cover so much more ground. We usually do anywhere from 33% more to 50% more in terms of the volume to match the same amount of effort and time while they're on the bike. But again, you got to make sure they're being smart about that. Okay, I'm only on number 3. I know it's a long one. So the other thing is, a lot of times you get young athletes, and especially girls. Girls come in right away, and they're super fast right away, and we all have that. Everybody's got these girls that are really good when they're freshmen, and they're good for 4 years. Where guys, they haven't reached physical maturity. Heck, they don't even reach mental maturity until they're 25. So there's so much. The guys just improve no matter what, and they look good no matter what. So guy coaches, no offense, but you always look really good even if you're not necessarily doing a great thing. The coaches I like to look at are the coaches that improve their female athletes from freshman to senior year, that they trend in an improved condition. And obviously we want the guys to do that too. But what we found is there are oftentimes kids come in, especially if they're like prepubescent females and they haven't gone through the change, that they'll run really fast early and then they don't run really well anymore. Back in the day, people used to say, oh, that we just burnt the kid out. The reality is you didn't burn the kid out. The kid is ferritin deficient, has a low ferritin score. Okay? When doctors do blood tests, a lot of times they'll just check hemoglobin. No. You got to get the ferritin score. You got to know how good can the oxygen actually be brought in through the blood. Okay? We need to know that. The second thing you need to be aware of with that is sometimes doctors will say, well, your ferritin score is fine. It's within the normal range. Normal for a person like me who is fat and sits on the couch and eats pizza, that's not normal for a distance runner. A lot of coaches talk about how you have to have a ferritin score of 30 before you should even really be practicing. We had a young lady this year who was tired and fatigued, and I'm like, you got to go get your blood work done. They did the blood work. They looked at the hemoglobin, then looked at the ferritin. Sure enough, the ferritin was very, very, very low. And immediately we start iron supplementing and doing things like that. And you and I know that doesn't improve that quickly, but psychologically knowing it's not your fault, that you're okay, that we found out what's going on, the kid improved a ton and qualified for state. When there was no hope of that happening halfway through the season, but because we found it and it was just so mentally empowering. Now, of course, later on, it will be physically empowering because we're going to bolster that person and we're going to prepare them, we're going to have them ready, and we've keyed that in. So one of the things I think you should do is that if you have long sprinters or you have middle distance runners or distance kids, that they should get a blood test to check their ferritin levels before, in the middle, and at the end of their season. They should be doing that. That should be part of their routine, and that will help. Okay? Cross training, as much as you can cross train when you can and where you can. So when we go indoors, this is number 4. When you go indoors, don't try to run on tile or on the thin carpet more than 2 days in a row. You should not do that. It should be every other day. So if you run on a Monday and you're doing long hallways and getting after it and doing stairs and all that kind of stuff, whatever you're going to do, which some of that might not be very advisable, okay, you should not come back and load them on the ground on that tile day 2. Cross train, do a core circuit, go watch video, show them the best athletes in the world, do a mental prep session, do something else, because the reality is so what, they miss out on a day of practice on the ground. So what, you don't have enough cross-training equipment. There's other things that you can do to get them ready to reduce their injuries and to keep them healthy and keep them happy. So do not run athletes 2 days in a row indoors. You will blow them up. And you're like, yes, I got it. Like we have at Parkway Central, I have a 270 meter hallway that we can run. That's relatively flat with no steps. It has just like little ramps. And that's really exciting because you're like, well, I can get a lot of stuff done. Yeah, you can. But by doing that, you also can get people injured. So you have to be very, very smart and very, very judicious in when and where you get those kids on that hard surface, because that's a lot harder than a track or turf. Last thing, mental injuries. Don't promise an athlete something that you cannot deliver on. Don't tell them they're going to be all-state if you know in your heart of hearts they can't be all-state. Now, you can tell them and it might not happen because they got injured or there was a weird mishap in the family, or they didn't work hard, they didn't train, they didn't prepare. All that's fine. But what they found out is recently the NCAA released a study about mental depression amongst the college athletes. 37% of track and field females were considered depressed. That means more than a third of the young ladies that we work with have mental depression at the NCAA. Now, why is that? Could it be body image issues? Could it be performance issues? Could it be just the normal stuff that happens for young people every day? Who knows? We have to be very careful with the mental situations and their mental faculties and being very professional when we deal with them. And you got to support them all the way. And that doesn't mean, you let them get out of hard workouts or they don't train and they don't do these. No, that's not the case. But just be aware that over 33% of these young women that you're working with are probably depressed. So you've got to build positivity in them all the time. You have to create a structure of positive self-talk, mantras, gratitude journals, all that stuff. Hit them up on that because they're probably already battling something. And even though you may think you're being fair and even to everyone, you got this one girl who's like, well, the only reason why that coach is talking to her is because she's the fastest kid on the team. Or the only reason why he's talking to her is because she's the cute, skinny blonde girl, or she's the redhead, or she's whatever, whatever it may be. And they think that. You don't think that. Your intentions aren't that way. You don't think you're giving off that impression, but they think you are. I, for a long time, thought that I was presenting positive vibes and positive thoughts with my face, and after doing a lot of these videos, number one, I'm sick and tired of looking at my ugly mug, but number two, I look a lot more intense than I intend, and so we have to be very careful with that. Now, the other thing I wanted to make you aware of too is that most of the people that I've found that I think probably would fit within that 33% of all track and field tend to be distance runners and tend to be thinker mindset, not warrior mindset athletes. So that percentage of distance runners or long sprinters that may have those issues is probably even higher. So how you handle them as a group, how you talk to them as a group, how you communicate with them as a group should probably be pretty different. But you also should put them in situations where they feel successful, where they feel comfortable, where they feel prepared. And those are things you need to be aware of. Where maybe with the sprinter, you can kind of get into their grill a little bit more and challenge them a little bit more because psychologically that's the way they're set up. So those are some things I wish I would have learned, and I learned the hard way by getting kids injured in the past or, not letting them reach the level that they could reach, not letting them get to their potential. And these things, there's so much. Obviously, this is the longest one I've ever done. There's so many things we can talk about. For more on that, though, if you guys check out the Sprinter's Compendium, okay, I've got a ton of information in this book on psychological stuff for sports psychology and also for injury prevention, which actually injury prevention is the second largest chapter I have in this book. You can pick it up at www.sprinterscompendium.com. We talk about all these different ideas. So thanks for hanging in there, guys, with me for 33 minutes. I know it's a long talk, but I hope you found some valuable ideas and thoughts and things to think about as we move forward to try to keep our kids healthy so that they can run their very best when we want them to run, jump, and throw their very best. Bye, guys.